Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's edition of our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider podcast. The three amigos are back as usual. We've got our Shaw Media Group sports editor, Kyle Nabors, is here. Of course, our ShawLocal.com Bears Insider beat reporter, Sean Hammond, is with us. I am Hub Arkush, and we thank you all for bearing with the schedule this week and joining us on Monday morning. If you're with us live, we just got caught up in a situation with minicamp last week where a little too much going on and some other schedule conflicts. And we knew nothing was going to happen after Thursday because they have gone home or gone away for summer vacation. With the end of the veteran minicamp, NFL teams around the league shut down for about 6 weeks. The facilities are open. Hallis Hall, there's people going in there. The players, I believe, can go in and use the facilities, the workout and training facilities if they want. But this is where traditionally, you get drafted, you buy a home, you make this your your neighborhood or whatever it may be. But very few of the players actually come from here. Obviously, there's a Cole Kmet and a Jack Sanborn every once in a while. But players, head back to their hometowns. They go to see family. They go on vacation. And so it is going to get kind of quiet. But, Sean, it was a little louder at minicamp than we expected. And it was interesting because I read, I don't remember if it was your news or in a column, we can check all of Sean's work, of course, at ShawLocal.com, that you reported, as expected, Robert Quinn wasn't there. I think that's the phrase that you use. I shouldn't say you reported that. I actually didn't expect that, to be honest with you. We kept hearing, and by the way, this isn't a right or wrong thing. I think everybody in the room had different opinions. But, from what he had to say, when he accepted the Piccolo Award a couple days before the draft, you could tell he wasn't overly thrilled about what was going on. But he did, with one question specifically say, well, he sure hopes they want him. And we kept hearing during the absences from voluntary camp that, well, it's voluntary. And we know that Quinn had not been in all of the OTAs and voluntary stuff the last couple of years. So I wasn't shocked when he wasn't there. But the fact that we still don't know why, I think we are all surmising or suspecting why, but we haven't heard from Robert Quinn and we haven't heard any demands from the Bears. So, it became the story of the week. And, Sean, I think it's interesting. We'll see where they go next.
Yeah, I would think if, we can all have our opinions and we can guess at why Robert Quinn wasn't there. But I keep coming back to the thought that if he wanted out, if he wanted a trade, that would be known. His agent would make that known. That would be reported nationally, and it hasn't. So that makes me wonder a little bit that, maybe we don't know what's going on. Maybe Robert Quinn really is just working on his own and didn't feel the need to come in. Certainly you want him there for that mandatory portion. I know he missed parts of last spring as well, but I believe he was there for the mandatory stuff. He wasn't, he was dealing with a back injury, I think. I don't think he was totally participating, but he was there last year. So you given that, you would expect him with a new coaching staff to be in the building when he's supposed to be in the building. And yeah, it was I'm sure a little bit disappointing for Matty Eberflus not to have him there this week.
Yeah, Sean, absolutely correct. He had never missed mandatory before, and the Bears can now fine him up to $88,800. It's about $14,000 for the first one, $29,000 for the second day, and then I think it goes to 44 or something like that the third day. I'm doing that from memory. They're not required to fine him, but they can, and I suspect will. And Kyle, what's interesting about this is if this was still Ryan Pace and Matt Nagy, I'd know exactly why he was out. It would have taken about 2-3 minutes to figure out, not because of any negative or positive comments about Pace and Nagy, but we knew them. We got to know them over the years. With Flus and with Ryan Poles, who we didn't even hear from, we don't know these guys yet. And watching how they react is interesting. And Matt Eberflus came into his media session after the first day of minicamp, and he usually starts with a statement of some kind, just take care of some highlights, get some things out of the way, maybe even set up some questions. And after mentioning 3 or 4 topics, he said, and lastly, Robert Quinn is not here. I'm not going to talk about it. I'm going to leave that to Ryan Poles. And there's really nothing else I can say. And then, we tried a couple follow-ups. It was clear he wasn't going to tell us anything. So, the fact that there's no indication at all, and I think Sean just nailed it. I mean, if he desperately wanted out, we'd be hearing that from his camp, or we think we would be hearing it from his camp. So we know he's not there. it's easy to guess why he might not be. He's coming off the best season of his career on a team that is going to struggle, to not end up with a top 5 draft pick. And, who wants to wrap it up that way at 32 years old? But that's just what we're all guessing at right now.
Well, I mean, you guys have had a lot more interaction with Robert Quinn than I have. My understanding of Robert Quinn, though, is he's a bit of I think we've talked about it on this podcast before. A mercurial guy, I think I called him. He's he has opinions. He lets his opinions be known. And I guess the way I'm reading it, you look back at what he said when he accepted the Piccolo reward, or the award, not the reward, and then the fact that he didn't show up. I think that's him saying that he's not happy with the direction of the franchise, but without, flat out. I don't think I don't think it's to the point where he's asking for a trade. I think he's just letting it known that he's not particularly pleased with the way things have gone. He came to Chicago thinking he was signing with a contender, or hoping he was signing with a contender. The Bears are clearly not taking that route. Whether that's him just, wanting to show his dissatisfaction. Maybe it's that point in the career. It's any way you can put a little pressure on without becoming a full on blowing distraction. But the thing that kind of bothered me, as you alluded to there, Hub, was it's not a great start when we're talking about the new regime. When Matt Eberflus is referring or deferring any kind of comment to the general manager, except we're not going to see Ryan Poles until the first day of training camp. You got to give a little more than that. You don't have to come right out and say it, but it's I don't know. It's not great.
Well, Kyle, now you're echoing the frustrations of every one of us who are in that meeting room every day, and that's been going on for a while with the Bears organization. They are not the most forthcoming with information, and I always worry that fans are going to think, oh, this is just the media guys sitting around bitching about how hard their jobs are. No, not at all. We are your conduit to the team. We are your bridge to the team. We know that fans want to know what's going on. We always get into this gray area, or although most teams, not just the Bears, try and make it more gray than it really is as to what creates a competitive advantage and what creates what makes you not competitive. And that has changed dramatically since the NFL went into the media business itself. And, a lot of these teams are keeping things closer to the vest. I actually had this conversation with somebody in an NFL front office just the other day, that it's becoming more and more obvious that there are things that the team websites are getting and reporting that are not being given to the free press, if you will, or at least not until after teams have reported it. That is a dangerous area to get into. It's raises the questions of antitrust violations and other things. I don't see any ink-stained wretch like me filing an antitrust suit against them, but it's something we struggle with. But in this case, I'm not sure this is that. I just think you've got the new regime, you've got the first-time head coach. They're going to be very careful, and we have to consider the possibility, maybe even the likelihood, knowing Robert Quinn, that Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles aren't exactly sure where they're at right now. That's one side of it. The other side that occurred to me, though, Sean, is I went back actually that afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, in the media room before I wrote, and listened to and reread the entire transcription of the last interview we had with Robert, the only one we've had since they got here. And there was one interesting, that was all interesting. In his case, he definitely said he wanted to be here, but he also, on a couple occasions, made allusion to what a crazy business it is, and you never know what's going to happen. And he clearly was not happy with the Khalil Mack trade. He didn't put it in those words, but all you got to do is read the way he put it, and then went back to it and referred to it again. So that was a bit of a hint. But the other thing that was really interesting was Matt Eberflus. I was looking at his comments, the 2 or 3 that he made. And one of the things he said is that Ryan, or something about, we are talking to them. He didn't say Robert, he said them. The other possibility here, guys, is that the Bears are trying actively to trade him. It would make sense with what they're doing right now. It wouldn't maybe make a lot of people happy. It might not even make some of his teammates happy. But if you look at, and I keep referring to the Von Miller trade, because here's a guy who is a year older than Robert Quinn, who had been injured for a year and a half, and it had not been himself for 2 years. And the Rams gave up a 2nd and 3rd round draft choice this year for him. Now, it was a deadline trade. The Rams were making a Super Bowl run. Sometimes that'll get you a little bit more. But what was so upsetting about the Khalil Mack trade was getting just a second-round pick and a sixth a year later, because those picks a year later are not worth the same amount that they are when you get them and use them in the same year. And so, now you did get all that cap relief, and that was the reason the Bears didn't get as much in draft, and they wanted that cap relief, so I understood it. But with Robert Quinn, if they let him go for just a day 3 pick, that would be pretty inexcusable after you see what the Rams got from Miller. And so what I'm getting here, and forgive me for being long-winded, it's possible that the Bears have told him that they're trying to trade him and out of respect. And so he said, well, if they're trying to trade me, why would I show up at their minicamp? So again, that's not something I'm reporting that I heard from anybody. But when you're guessing like this, guys, and I'll kick it back to you, Sean, it is important that we try and at least raise the possibilities on both sides of the issue.
That's a really interesting point, and you might be right, Hub. I mean, they could be shopping him right now, and if you're from the Bears' perspective, if you're doing that, you don't necessarily want the news out there that Robert Quinn wants to be traded, because then teams are going to say, well, they'll get desperate enough eventually. We can lowball him and see what happens. And Robert Quinn has never really struck me as a guy who is going to make a big deal out of anything. We've talked to him. We see his personality. It wouldn't surprise me if he does want out, if he does want to be traded from the Bears. It wouldn't surprise me if he, wants to keep that behind closed doors. He's a private guy. He's not a guy who is gonna get up in front of the room and scream and shout over anything, really.
If and from the Bears' perspective too, if they are actively looking to trade him or have had those conversations, they, Hub, you were talking about what they got for Khalil Mack and what Von Miller was able to command in season. It could be the fact that the Bears looked at trading Robert Quinn, said that's not enough. Why don't we hold on to him, get into the season, and then see if we can get a Von Miller type package?
Well, these are all possibilities. And just getting back to what Sean was just saying, and again, excuse me, guys, we're guessing and trying to present all the facts. I don't know. But what I'm suggesting is he may not even want to be traded, but he may have been told that as part of the rebuild, we're going to try and deal you. And out of respect to you, we're going to try and find a spot you want to go. Ryan Poles made a big deal out of with the Khalil Mack trade. One of the things that was important was that he knew he'd be happy going to the Chargers, going to a contender. And so it could even be that they're trying to do the same thing with Robert, and that his attitude is, well, okay, that's fine if that's what you're going to do. He may be happy coming back. He may be waiting to see. But if he knows that they're trying to deal him, listen, if I'm in his shoes and they're trying to deal me, I don't know that I want to show up at minicamp, and have to face my teammates and answer questions I can't answer. So again, these are all just the possibilities. The reality, unfortunately, is that no matter what happens, this is almost certainly not going to be a winning football team this year. And so, Robert Quinn obviously is going to be a story because he is the best player on the team. He was the only All-Pro last year. He was the only Pro Bowler, and he set records. I mean, he became the greatest pass rusher for a single season in Bears history. He was second in the NFL in sacks with 18.5, and it wasn't close. So the next up was 2 sacks behind him was Myles Garrett. And the only guy out in front of him was T.J. Watt, who unbelievably has 47 sacks in the last 2 seasons, guys. The Watt brothers in their prime are pretty good football players. I'm getting distracted all of a sudden. So I know we've got questions. Go ahead,
I want to say I don't want to feel like I'm attacking this gentleman here, but he has a question. I do want to explain it though. So Antoine Robinson Jr. said, "Can I ask why media just makes assumption? Why can't it be he's rehabbing an injury or training to be in peak shape?" I mean, you're making assumptions there if you're wondering if you're saying that he could potentially be rehabbing an injury. One, I mean, if you're tuning in to watch this show, it would be really boring if we just sat here and didn't, try and read between the lines. But, the reason the media does it is it's not just that, but it's because we are around these players. We do have a little bit better insight. And yeah, we have to make a leap of faith. But when you've been in the business long enough, you see the cycles, the personalities, you can start to get a feel for what's going on behind the scenes. You're not always 100% right, but I guarantee you, Sean and Hub have a better sense of what's going on at Hallis Hall than most people.
Well, and Antoine, listen, I understand your question, but I think I've tried to say 3 or 4 times in the last 30 seconds, in the last 4 or 5 minutes, assumptions is exactly what we're trying to avoid. I just explained, we're trying to give you all the possibilities. And the answer to your question is, why do we have to make assumptions? Because the Bears don't tell us things they should tell us. Yeah, I mean, and that's honestly, as bluntly as I can put it for you. I mean, yeah, I know I'm old and cranky and cynical and all that, but I have spent over 45 years in this business, and I can tell you it was not until the last 5 or 10 years, as these teams got in the media business, started competing with us, that a lot of this type of stuff came up and quite frankly got hidden because we're just trying to report to you, Antoine, what's going on. There's no reason for the Bears not to share this. It's not going to hurt them and make them less competitive in any way. So we're trying to do exactly the opposite of what you're accusing us. Where we're telling you these are all the possibilities we don't want to assume, but because the Bears aren't telling us, at least this is what we can tell you could be going on. Is that fair, Sean?
Yeah, and every NFL team is secretive in their own ways, and while they are secretive, the fact is that players and teams do things for a reason. So Robert Quinn is not here for a reason. We just don't quite know what that is, but it's worth discussing.
Yeah, and guys, I guess to put a cap on this one, Robert Quinn is one of the best guys on that team and in that locker room. He's a true free spirit. He will say what's on his mind. He is such a pleasure that once every year, at the end of the year, each chapter of the Pro Football Writers of America votes for what we call a good guy. And in our case, the award was named for Jeff Dickerson, our buddy who tragically passed away last December at a very young age from cancer. But it's the Jeff Dickerson Chicago Media Good Guy Award. And it was a tie. And it goes to the guy who is the most cooperative and the most helpful and the most pleasant with the media. And it was a tie between Robert Quinn and Tayshaun Gibson. So, Robert Quinn is as good as they come when it comes to being straight with us. And so it just makes it a little bit that much more frustrating that we can't report to you exactly what's going on because we don't know. And actually, guys, I have to do something here because in remembering JD, we had another just tragic loss over the weekend. Dear friend of mine, my oldest friend on the beat, actually, and a dear friend of everybody on the beat, John Moon Mullen, who started at the Daily Herald and the business side and then moved over to the Tribune and came on the Bears beat and then ended up at NBC Sports Chicago. Moon passed away on Sunday after a 3.5-year battle, possibly the most heroic battle I've ever seen with pancreatic cancer. Defied odds, just did so much better than any of the doctors expected, and was so inspirational that over the last year or so began a series of YouTube videos for other cancer patients talking about attitude over cancer and helping them to survive and have good quality of life or the best quality of life they could. It's very personal with me because my little brother's been going through a cancer battle in which it is going to be terminal at some point. And Moon, just as good as they come. Sean, I know you're a younger reporter, and I'm not even sure if you cross paths because Moon's been out of the room the last few years. But Kyle, I'm guessing that you, of course, met Moon in our days down in Bourbonnais, and just universally beloved by everybody he came in contact with. One of my best friends, and just can't say enough about his courage and his grace. And sadly, he left us yesterday, but believe he's in a better place. So, Kyle, I don't know if you wanted to add anything or not.
Yeah, I mean, Moon was an absolutely fantastic person to be around. I started out when I started around the Bears. I was actually working for my hometown newspaper. I grew up in the Bourbonnais area, which was a great way to meet Moon because anyone that knew Moon was, he always was looking for a good place to eat, a good restaurant, something, a good place to hang out. And since I was from Bourbonnais and they were spending several weeks down there, Moon, when he found out where I was from, of course, wanted to know where the best places to go was. I got to, strike up a conversation, got to know him through that. Hub, you'll laugh at this. I mean, too, he was always very proud. What was it, 15 years going out to Bourbonnais, and he had found an apartment that he actually was able to rent every summer. He was super proud of that to get in there every year. But he liked being down there, and he'd sit in the stand with you after the Bears kind of pushed us back from the ropes. I remember sitting in the stand with Moon one of my last years down there, and he'd tell you stories, but he'd also give you advice on anything you asked, really, whether it was life or your career. He always had a nugget of information to share with you, and he was always happy to do it. So yeah, it's a tough weekend.
Yeah, we actually go back to the Platteville days and even further than that, a decade back, the end of the dynasty, so to speak, and the end of the Ditka days, and that's where we first became friends, and Moon, an avid bicyclist, would go out and ride, country trips, put on 25, 30 miles some days. A guitar player, a teacher, just a real renaissance man, and a bit of a foodie. And he'd laugh and then get pissed at me when I say almost my sommelier, because what I know about wine is red and white, and I don't like white. And Moon studied it a little bit, and there's just not a lot of emotion left. I've cried it out a few times, and it really. The way he defied the odds of this horrific disease, it was pancreatic cancer, and really until the last few weeks, never struggled with it. At any rate, he's in a better place now, and to his dear wife Carolyn, who's become such a good friend, his sister Ann, and his daughter Jenny, all of our thoughts and prayers are with you guys, and we will be with you, for forever, not just in the wake of this terrible news. So, Moon would want us to get back to talking some football, and he'd also want us to talk about the offensive line, which was always one of his favorite subjects. And and that was not just with this offensive line. It's gone on for years. There was a time when we celebrated the Bears as annually having one of the best offensive lines in football. Actually, now that I think about it, pretty much from that team of the '80s all the way through the second Super Bowl team in '06. And you look at that line they put together with Olin Kreutz and Reuben Brown and John Tate and Terrence Metcalf. DK Metcalf's dad played with those guys for a while. But unfortunately, in recent years, it's obviously become an issue. And the other thing that got a lot of ink last week, although Matt Eberflus tried to tone it down, was Tevin Jenkins still running with the twos. And Matt Eberflus told us that was always the plan to look at different combinations, and that they split the OTAs and on-field practices in half. They had 12 of them, so it was 6 for Jenkins and then 6 with the combination they went. He also pointed out that they were, moving people around on the depth chart at wide receiver and defensive line. And Sean, I wrote a column on that, which is at shawlocal.com. I found that interesting because those are the 3 least talented position groups on the team, and they don't have 5 starters on the offensive line. They don't have 3 starters at wide receiver. They may have 4 starters with NFL chops on the defensive line, but they're kind of journeymen at best. And so it's understandable that they're trying to figure folks out. But I want to give credit where it's due. I think it was Adam Johns at The Athletic who wrote it quite simply and said if Tevin Jenkins was showing what they want, that he'd be running with the first team, because he's basically a rookie himself. He missed almost all of last year. And obviously, at least at right tackle, they're not thrilled with what he's done. And that has to be a concern, because the main reason they didn't do more during the offseason and veteran free agency on the offensive line was the hope that Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borum are going to be their bookend tackles of the future. Now, that may still be. Again, they haven't even put pads on yet. So they could just be trying to motivate Tevin Jenkins by making him run with the second string. But it's not a good look, and I don't think everybody thought it was going to continue. We thought it was going to be a workout or two for Braxton Jones to get him some time at left tackle, but it doesn't answer why Larry Borum is at right tackle ahead of Jenkins instead of going to right guard. So it was another big topic of the week.
Yeah, if I was a betting man, I would still put my money on Larry Borum and Tevin Jenkins at left and right tackle, once the season starts. But this was an interesting development here the last couple of practices, and you're right. I mean, there's a reason that they chose to put Tevin on that second line and move Larry over to right tackle. I mean, that says a lot. That they're clearly high on Larry Borum, and whether he's going to be on the left or the right side, he's probably going to be in that starting lineup. The question is what they do with Tevin. There's, like I said, I still see him eventually getting that starting job at right tackle, but there's some, they need to see more from him, and that was clear in their decision to do this. And while they might like Braxton Jones, I'd be pretty surprised to see a 5th round tackle from Southern Utah be your week 1 starter at left tackle.
Kyle, they did a bunch of interesting things last week. Some of this is fairly traditional. Some of it was Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles putting their stamp on the new regime. But Tuesday, the first day of minicamp, was also Alumni Day, and so they had a pretty good turnout. I actually spent a good part of the practice watching with Marcus Robinson, because Marcus Robinson is one of my all-time favorite Bears. Not only had a couple Pro Bowl seasons for them, but an outstanding individual. We were having fun. We hadn't seen each other in a while, but I did get to visit with a couple of those somewhat legendary offensive linemen I was just talking about, and I'm not going to say who they were because I'm going to tell you some of what they said. And there is concern with the talent level on the offensive line, but both of them, and these are guys from two different eras, just in conversation, suggested to me that they think they should just move Tevin Jenkins into that right guard spot right now. I keep talking about Larry Borum maybe being a right guard because that's what some of the teams I talked to pre-draft last year, obviously in 21, thought where he could land as a day 2 draft pick instead of wait until the 5th round as he did with the Bears. And so there's certainly, at least precedent for the idea. But these guys were telling me, and obviously, Jenkins is built more like a tackle than a guard, but guards come in all sizes these days. And these guys independently just suggested to me that looking at what appear to be the skill set he has right now, and that temperament that he flashed that is so important to Ryan Poles, that may play better at guard, and that eventually that could end up being the way this works out. Again, everything's on the table. Antoine, we're not guessing. We tell you all the possibilities here. So I don't know what you think about that, Kyle.
Well, someone asked it here. I can't find the question. Sorry, guys. Asked about an update for Dakota Dozier because that kind of changed things too, right? I don't think.
Yeah, that was a big thing earlier this week that we didn't really touch on yet.
Yeah, he was carted off, right?
He was, but the other thing that and again, I don't blame Flus for this, is he's just said clearly, I'm not commenting on injuries until we get to training camp because I don't have to. And again, that just gets people, guessing and surmising. It didn't look good. But I got to tell you guys, if Dakota Dozier was going to end up the starting guard on this football team, they were in big trouble. He's a 7-year veteran. He had one season where he was the regular starter. It was 2020 in Minnesota, and yeah, it was the COVID year and everything else. But it worked out so poorly that he was only able to even get active with the Vikings for 6 games the following year, and it wasn't due to injury. He's a journeyman. He's a veteran. You find him on every NFL roster. They're valuable if they have to step up and start a couple games due to injury. But Dakota Dozier is just not, and he's not the future either. I mean, that's the thing. He's another one of these middle-aged veterans that they brought in. So you hate to see anybody get hurt. And obviously, when you go off on a cart, you worry about it a little bit more. And we certainly hope he's going to be ready for training camp and get a chance to compete. But I don't think him missing practice reps has much to do with anything. The fact that they were kind of rotating him and Sam Mustipher tells you, I think that they've got Mustipher and Dozier holding that spot until they see, whether Borum or Jenkins or somebody else ends up in it. I'd love to see Sam Mustipher get a shot because I don't understand why his center position was given away without competition. Lucas Patrick has done nothing in the NFL to show that he's a better center than Sam Mustipher. So we don't know what's going on there. I do take Flus at his word when he says that it doesn't matter until we get to training camp and put pads on. I couldn't agree with that more because these guys haven't even hit each other yet. But all we can comment is on what we're seeing, and that's what we saw.
Well, going into the offseason training activities coming out of the draft, I think we felt like the Bears were close to solidifying. When I say solidify, I don't mean that we thought that they were going to excel, but we thought they were close to solidifying for the 5 starting spots outside of right guard. We figured Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borum were going to take those tackle spots, whether it was left or right side, we weren't quite sure. But given the way that the Bears approached the OTAs and stuff, makes you think that outside of Lucas Patrick and Cody Whitehair, it's an open competition. That doesn't mean that Tevin Jenkins won't end up at left tackle or right tackle and Borum vice versa. But if Adam Johnson, they clearly are pushing these guys, and whether that's because they just want to push them because they're youngsters or because they don't know what the best combination is, or someone isn't performing up to the levels that they wanted to during this offseason program, or someone didn't show up right in the right shape. There's a lot of things that we haven't, but it's clear that they're not set and they're not particularly content with what they have right now. They don't know the best combination.
Yeah, and I got to caution everybody. It certainly wouldn't be unprecedented if Braxton Jones turned out to be the answer at left tackle. Charles Leno was a 7th round pick out of Boise State. I'd have to go back and check, but I don't think he started as a rookie. I think he moved into the lineup his second year. He may have gotten an emergency start or two as a rookie, but I don't think he got that position until year 2 and wasn't really settled into it until year 3. An even better example is Jason Peters will be inducted into the Hall of Fame in 5 years if he doesn't play for somebody this year. He was an undrafted rookie free agent as a tight end out of Arkansas, as I recall. So it happens, but it happens ever so rarely. And for a 5th round pick to come out of it's not an FCS school, but it's just not, it's not Power 5. It's not as competitive as the top college teams. And to be starting in the NFL on day one, that is highly, highly unlikely and highly unwise when you realize that what this year is all about is finding out if you have the franchise at quarterback and then leaving his blind side at risk the way that would. So I just think, I hope he does. I hope Braxton Jones is the next Jason Peters. I almost said the next Charles Leno, but since I was hard on Charles the whole time he was here, I think I won't hope for another one. But Charles
funny. Robert Phillips. Someone had asked about I think remaining free agents out there. I'm not sure if someone had followed up with Leno, but Robert Phillips, our guy from the UK, said no, please don't mention Leno. And it's funny. So I don't know if Charles Leno's still out there in free agency.
I thought he did re-sign with the Skins.
Yeah, I thought it was like a 4-year deal, right? Okay, I'm not sure what Robert was referencing.
It was multi-year deal when he signed.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he re-signed with Washington. And listen, Charles is a serviceable left tackle. He's just not good enough. He's good enough to get you beat is the problem. And you look at the places he's ever played.
Fitzpatrick hurt.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't want to blame it on anybody, but he waved at whoever that was who went by him, pretty much ended Ryan Fitzpatrick's career. And he also, I'm trying to remember who he waved at in that horrible loss against the Lions the year before they let him go. Remember, it was late in the season, and they had a win pretty much in the bank, and then
at Soldier Field, right?
Yeah,
and then they got a 15-point lead or something like that.
Yeah, but it ended with the strip sack on Mitch, which of course everybody wanted to go after Mitch. But you look at the tape, and he never saw the guy coming from his blind side, and it was because Leno never tried to block him. But hey, as I said, Charles, he's a great young man, and he's obviously become a pretty good football player because Washington, is happy with him there. He just never was good enough here. But that's not who we're talking about now.
He is a good dude, and to say I remember seeing Charles. What did he come into the league like 2014?
Yeah, I got it up there. Hub, it was 2014, and Hub, you're right. He only had one start as a rookie.
But I remember his first couple of years in Chicago, and I thought there's just no way this guy's going to last in the league. And he turned into a really nice NFL player. I mean, that's made a nice career for himself. So
he's a great example of why left tackle is such a unique position. You see these offensive linemen who end up playing up and down the line, and there are some guys who can go to left tackle, like an Elgton Jenkins has played everywhere, including left tackle for the Packers, but it's rare because the left tackles, they have to be big and strong and powerful, but it's the one position where finesse and athleticism is more important than power on that offensive line because of the incredible athletes you're dealing with who are those pass rushing right ends and strong side pass rush linebackers in the 3-4s. And Leno had the ability to move and get his hands on people. His problem is that he was never strong or powerful enough to overpower them or handle them a high enough percentage of the time when he did get his hands on them. But the first thing with a left tackle is you got to get your hands on that guy, and he was pretty good at that. And I don't know why I'm talking about him in past tense. He's probably going to start again this year. So far we don't really know with Larry Borum. I mean, there were flashes, but they're not doing anything until they get in pads and really get to a couple exhibition games where you're going to be able to tell how far these guys have come.
Yeah, someone up in the chat had said, calm down, wait until they get in July and put some pads on. We're definitely calm, but it's very possible that we're going to end up where we started with Tevin Jenkins and Larry Borum at those tackle positions. I just think that all three of us expected to have a bit more clarity coming out of these OTAs of what the offensive line is going to look like. And really, when we get to July 27th or whatever it is, we're going in with a blank slate here pretty much, aren't we?
Yeah, and I guess, Kyle, the one reason I'm not as convinced as I was that it is going to be Borum and Jenkins is I look at the other guys they've signed, and Julian Davenport and Sean Coleman are both professional swing tackles. They're not really good enough to be starters, but they can step in and start at left or right. A lot of backups are just right tackles. These guys are both professional swing tackles. They have ended up starting half to full seasons for other teams. I want to say Coleman started 16 games in Cleveland, if I'm not mistaken. And I think Davenport ended up starting quite a bit for the Colts last year, maybe the year before. He's done it in a few spots. So, again, when you look at how this team is put together and what they hope to accomplish this year, I'm sure they're hoping that they don't end up with one of those two as a starter. I don't think Coleman would start at left tackle. I think Davenport could start at either, but Coleman could end up starting at right tackle if that was how they saw it. It's unlikely that both make the team, because to have two veteran swing tackles as your backups when you drafted all these kids doesn't make sense. But I really thought it was a done deal that Borom and Jenkins were going to start the season and either sink or swim. Now, I think it's still better than 50-50 that happens, Kyle, but I'm not convinced. I think that there is, in my mind, obviously more concern about Jenkins than Borom. But again, we haven't talked about the other possibility. It may be that they're not that thrilled with either one of them, but they're comfortable that Borom can play on the right side, and that's why they've moved him over there, and that they may be thinking about Jenkins at guard. They maybe they'll switch him back and let him compete with Braxton Jones on the left side. I do understand what they're saying when they basically tell us honestly they don't know these guys yet, and so they're looking at them everywhere and putting the tape together. I don't think that our listeners and viewers may know when we talk about these guys grinding and with tape and film and whatever. They film every practice session, every voluntary and mandatory practice session, and they have a full coaches staff meeting going over that film every day. And so, they really are studying these guys, and I think Sean making sure that they get looks at them, in every way they can.
Yeah, and one other note, just before we move on from the line too, I don't know how closely you were paying attention, Hub, but it looked like. To me, I don't remember seeing Sam Mustipher playing much center at all this past week. I mean, he was almost exclusively at guard. Even, in the individual drills at the beginning of the practice, the centers will do all their they'll set up with the football and they'll do a snap. And I didn't see Sam doing that. We saw him on the left side and the right side at guard, but as we're talking, about Dakota Dozier and that injury and all that means, I don't think we really saw Sam playing center at all. Doug Kramer was that center with the second string.
Sean, I have not seen Sam at center since he was running with the twos at the voluntary veteran minicamp.
Yeah.
The one before the draft. I mean, there were a couple OTAs early where he may have been taking it with the twos, but he has spent all his time since then flipping with Dozier at guard. And that's something else I was talking to some of these veteran offensive linemen about. And by the way, Mullen was not one of the two veteran offensive linemen I was talking to at minicamp. As you might guess, Mullen wasn't there as far as I know. But Mullen and I have talked about Sam because Mullen has been, his professional coach outside of the team. That's not the right way to put it. His personal tutor, if you will. Yeah, but it's more about a training partner. Mullen has his own gym and he trains a few players. And so he knows Sam well. And he really believes in the kid and believes that he can play guard, but even he acknowledges is not the prototypical body type for it. If Sam were to win that guard spot, even with whatever weight he's carrying, which they continue to list incorrectly, there's no way he's 332 pounds, but he would be one of the smaller guards in the league. Now, hey, he's also, been the only way he made the team and started at center for a year and a half is he's a classic technician. His technique is outstanding. He's learning new technique at guard, so you don't rule anything out. But right now, he's probably the front runner at that guard spot, depending on what's going on with Dakota Dozier's. We don't even know specifically what the injury was. So it'll be one of the other really interesting stories to watch in training camp once they get the pads on.
Mr. Shorty had popped in here. I'm sorry, that's CJ. Mr. Shorty had said, is there any record of how much weight Mustipher has lost? Hub, you kind of alluded to it, that the Bears you think have not updated that weight, at least on the sheets.
Well, no, Sam has definitely not lost weight. He's put on weight. He was the exception. There's two different competing issues here. Ryan Poles came in and talked about his vision of offensive line and that he wanted a lot of guys to get lighter and quicker, more athletic. But Sam was undersized to begin with, so there was no way he could drop more weight. He definitely does look bigger to me. I know that if he was going to play guard, which is where he's competing, he was going to have to put some weight on. But as I said, they list him on the roster at 332. He came to the Bears at 295. He is not carrying 37 pounds more than he was when he got here. He's added a lot of good weight in the weight room. This is the part I know about working with Olin. Olin is a fantastic trainer. The guys who work with him just swear by him. And I know he's put on some good weight, but it isn't 37 pounds. I just can't imagine, where he's at right now.
Well, even if he's a bit undersized, we've heard from Matt Eberflus and Ryan Poles about wanting guys that work hard, that have a little bit of grit to them, right? So Sam Mustipher definitely fits that mold. So this could be a case of them saying he kind of fits the profile. Yeah, he's undersized, but let's give him that chance at a guard position and see if he can run with it.
Well, and I know he likes being a Bear, and he is buying in. One of you check these subtle little things, and for many, many years when I was part of their broadcast team, I would go to their Bears Care Gala, their black tie event, which is a big charity fundraising thing. It's not required for anybody, but haven't gone in recent years, mainly because putting on a tuxedo is akin to getting in a casket for me. But saw some of the pictures and some of the coverage, and they get players to come. But again, it's not required for them either. And one of the guys I noticed in all the photos this year, beaming and happy to be there, was Sam Mustipher. And now they may feel good because it's a charity event, gala, but we have no indication that he wants out or is unhappy as a Bear. And I got to be honest with you guys, if I was him and I held that position down for a year and a half, not doing a great job, but doing a much better job than angry fans gave me credit for, and they brought in Lucas Patrick and gave him my job. And by the way, Lucas seems like a good guy. We don't really know him yet, and I kind of like what I've seen of him so far. But again, my job is to report the facts here, guys, and went back and studied his career and looked at the tape. And he's not a start. He's never really been a starting center. He did it for emergency purposes with the Packers. He was not the starting center at the beginning of the year last year when he ended up starting more games there than he did at guard. And he only started a few games at center in 2020. And for his first 3 years in the NFL, he was a backup. He's an undrafted rookie free agent, just like Sam Mustipher. So if I'm Sam and they bring this other veteran in and give him my job, I'm pretty unhappy about that. But we've seen no signs of that. So it will be. He's kind of one of my training camp favorites. I'm going in thinking, boy, if this guy were to win a spot on the team and even end up starting at guard, that would be just a fantastic accomplishment. And such a good guy, Sean. I'm really pulling for him.
Yeah, he's been dealt this tough situation here with Lucas Patrick coming in, and he's the type of guy who that is maybe irking him a little bit, but he's not going to say it. And deep down, he really is going to want to push for whatever spot is available to him. And if it's right guard, I fully expect him to 100% go after that and do whatever he needs to do to get his body in the optimum shape for that position.
Sam's not the type of guy that's going to pout. Like, if you tell him that he has to earn a job, he's going to go out and try and earn that job. So that's not really surprising to see him, continue to work really hard. He came in as an undrafted free agent, undersized out of Notre Dame. And, he seems to have that chip on his shoulder that he's going to do whatever he can to earn a spot and stay in the league.
Guys, one of the things that we tend to overlook, and some of it's just getting a little cynical, and some of it's because it's not necessarily on the field. But what is interesting to me about this team and this organization is, in spite of years of concern about management from the top down and not being overly competitive in the last couple decades, and I know this for a fact because my primary job has always been covering the NFL, not just the Bears. Chicago is still one of the 3, 4, 5 top destinations in the NFL for players, for coaches, for everything. I mean, why wouldn't you want to be here? Now, those of us who've been here all our lives and get caught up in the big picture know that we're a city and a state with our problems, but that's not what we're talking about here. I mean, this is an entertainment product. This is a sports team. There are mostly, not many, but mostly great places to live and feel safe around here. And guys want to be around Chicago. And another big theme of training camp is all the things that Matt Eberflus is trying to do to reinforce that culture. And so one of the things I don't think we talked much about, because I think we took the week off, or maybe we did touch on it, is for their final scheduled OTA, the team elected to cancel practice and work on the field, and instead got the Cubs to give them Wrigley Field with the Cubs on the road, and took the entire team out to Wrigley. And they had what we used to call in junior high school kind of a field day, where they had fun competitions that were kind of made up things, not real sports. And they split up in teams and tried to compete. And they had a home run derby, and they did some other things. And I was struck by interesting team building activity. And I was struck by how many of the players talked about how cool it was to be at Wrigley Field and learn some of the history. And I just thought, well, good for you guys, because you got to go play on the field. You're not like us, and we have to pay for those tickets and buy the $1 million hot dogs and go watch one of the worst teams in baseball. And so I know I'm getting off the subject here, guys, but while it was an interesting experience for the Bears, it kind of reminded me of how the Cubs have taken away one of the greatest joys in my life as a lifetime fanatic Cubs fan and season ticket holder. And I don't know, guys. Let's just take 2 or 3 minutes because, we're sports fans like everybody else. And I took the grandkids out a couple weeks ago, even though I'm kind of trying to do my own quiet protest against what's going on out there. And Kyle, I know you were there, I guess, the other day.
Yeah, that's why we weren't on Friday.
Yeah, I mean, it's still Wrigley Field, still a beautiful place, but there's not a lot else to enjoy out there right now these days, is there?
No, it was that it was odd. I didn't expect there to be such a crowd. I was there on Friday for the Braves and Cubs. It was a 1-0 game, not exactly the most exciting baseball game to watch either. But yeah, they ended up having a pretty good crowd that day. I've been to the park. I grew up a Sox fan. I remain a Sox fan. It's really the only sports team in anything that I actually care about. But I like going to Wrigley, particularly since it's been renovated. But I was laughing, or kind of sad laughing. I went down and grabbed some lunch. It was just like a chicken tender basket with fries, and I got a water and a beer. I think it was $33. It's tough to take a family to a sporting event right now.
Well, and guys, Sean, there's some really interesting analogies here because there's actually a column idea that Sean and I talked about the other day that I want to ruin it. We're going to talk about it some more because I did start working on it, just about sports in general in Chicago. But the Cubs and the Bears are in the same place right now, but they're handling it very differently. You've got Ryan Poles, and this is a direct quote. He said, "We don't want to use the word rebuild because that's kind of sensitive." And then he confirmed it was a rebuild because he said, "But we know it's not going to get done in 1 year, so we keep chipping away." The Cubs have gone the other way. They don't care who knows. They don't care that that they're trying to be as bad as they can because they believe that's a way to be good. Now, again, they're not going to say they're trying to lose, and they claim they thought they'd cobbled enough together to compete this year. Anybody who knows anything about baseball knew they didn't. But they are putting on such an awful product out there, and yet they officially this year became the most expensive ticket in baseball. And as Kyle just reported, I mean, I don't know what the concession price is relative to. I know it's not cheap over at the rate, but I know it's cheaper than it is at Wrigley. And so on one hand, you've got this Cubs organization just saying, yeah, we're ripping you off for your own good. And then you've got the Bears who are trying to take a very different approach, I think, to this thing and claiming that they think that they can, win games this year and, how they're putting it together. I suppose there are some similarities there, and that the Cubs thought, well, we sign a Stroman and we bring a free agent over from Japan, and that's all great. But it's a very frustrating time to be with both these teams. And yet I find Cubs fans just soaking it up, going along and saying, okay. And we can see in our comments section right here, Bears fans aren't going to be nearly as patient. And so to me, it's just kind of an interesting comparison.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a football versus baseball thing, but it sure seems like the Cubs are going to be digging out of this hole for a long time. I don't know if that's just because baseball takes longer. You're waiting for your guys to come up from the minors, but I would rather pay right now to go see Justin Fields and Cole Kmet take batting practice than maybe see what they're putting out on the field at Wrigley.
I'm a big baseball guy, and when I know who Christopher Morel is now. Like when I was at the game on Friday, but when he first got called up, there are not a ton of names in baseball where I have to go and look it up when someone's called up. I pay a lot of attention.
You're a baseball guy.
Yeah, I play a lot of fantasy baseball. So like Christopher Morel batting leadoff, and when I had to go or like Frank Schwindel got hurt the other day, and PJ Higgins came in to play first base, and I was like, who the hell is PJ Higgins?
Oh, you got to know the PJ Higgins story. I don't think his first two major league at bats, I believe, were hits, and because actually it was funny, he got called back up the day I took my grandkids out there, and opened the game in the bottom of or not opened the game, but came up in the bottom of the second, tripled down the line, and cleared the bases, and he's one of my favorite unknown Cubs, actually. It's a good kid. He's been interviewed a few times since, and he's one of these guys with stars in his eyes. Can't believe he's playing in the bigs at Wrigley Field, which is kind of fun to see. I mean, it's the only thing they've got left is that when you see, as bad as they are, how much these kids are excited by it. At least that part of it is fun.
Our guy, Don Burr, who I've now blocked like 4 accounts from his in there and telling me that I can't win. Don, I really don't care if you come in and talk Detroit. Just don't spam the chat, because it makes it more difficult for me to find questions and stuff. And by the way, I can win. I can block your IP address. So just don't be annoying. I'll try and let you stay. But if you're annoying, I am going to block your IP address, buddy.
That sounds like a threat, Kyle.
Yeah.
And Don, as a Lions fan, trying to troll Bears fans was laughable enough. But as a Tigers fan, if he's going to go after the Cubs, Don, we're going to unblock them all so you can come in and make an ass out of yourself. I mean, come on. That's about as ridiculous as we're all having fun. I think you know that. So everybody welcome, guys. We just may not get to your comments if they get annoying after a while. So, guys, let's bring it back if we will. I think most folks are here for the Bears and the NFL. Some other stories. We don't do a lot of NFL news, but I was hosting on The Score the other night and got to visit with an old friend, Sean Salisbury, of course, longtime NFL backup quarterback, was fairly big on the national scene in media. I think it was at ESPN for a long time. He's now relaxing, he's the morning host at Sports Talk 790 down in Houston. And we purposely set out to touch base on some of the off the field issues going on. Of course, Deshaun Watson is one of the biggest ones. And I think that I don't know. I never understood what the Haslams and Kevin Stefanski and anybody in the Cleveland organization was thinking, not so much in trading for Deshaun Watson, but making him the highest paid quarterback in history. And when I say that, no, it's not the biggest contract. Patrick Mahomes has that, but the $230 million guaranteed dollars they gave him is the most guaranteed money ever given out in the NFL by a long shot. I think it's by almost $50 million. And they did it knowing that he had these unresolved domestic abuse or sexual assault, whatever you want to call them, cases against him. And again, allegations. I'm not convicting anybody without a trial, but 22 of them at the time. And they said that they had done their homework and they were comfortable that this would all be worked out in a way that would be palatable to their fans. And since then, he's now been sued by 2 more women for the same thing. And there are reports out there that there are more coming. And it was interesting to get Sean's take on the reaction in Houston. They were just glad down there that they were able to get as much from the Browns as they did while all of this was still pending. Now, I don't know how the Cleveland Browns people are looking at themselves in the mirror and dealing with this because, minimally, you got to believe Sean's take was that the suspension's got to be at least a year. But it's not even the suspension so much. I mean, we're in an age these days, and it wasn't this way when I was growing up in the business, but it is now. Women make up half the NFL's fan base, and not that they should be any more offended than men. We should all be offended if any of this is true. But I don't know what the Cleveland Browns are thinking right now, guys. And I don't know, they're going to go to camp, and they've said Deshaun Watson is going to be number 1 on the depth chart. But how do you do that waiting for the other shoe to drop and the suspension that is coming and answer to your fans even what this guy's been accused of and what he may be guilty of?
Yeah, it's all the timing. We don't know when a potential suspension is going to come. And the other thing too is if you're the Browns, you've mortgaged your future over this deal. What was it? 3 first-round picks in that trade, and a couple other picks in there as well. It's certainly, this is, if you're following the NFL for the drama, I mean, this is the Deshaun Watson Baker Mayfield situation is absolutely the one to be watching, because if Deshaun winds up getting suspended for this entire season, I don't know what I can't imagine Baker Mayfield's reaction is going to be, oh yeah, I'll just come in and start, because those bridges have been burned.
Well, but here's what's interesting, guys, and nobody's talking about it. He is very much under contract. That they exercise their option on. This may be exactly what they're thinking. As unhappy as he may want to be, they may already be writing Watson off for this season. And we have no new news to report. Mr. Shorty is asking, is he going to be suspended? You bet your buddy's going to be suspended, and it's going to be a big one, because the NFL is not going to ignore the potential public relations nightmare that this guy is, the way that the Haslams are apparently willing to ignore it.
And they certainly don't want that shoe to drop in the middle of the season. Like this will be taken care of before the season starts. I'd be shocked if it wasn't, because they don't want a week 3 storyline where it's dominated with Deshaun Watson having more allegations come out and they have to take action on it. Like, they don't want that happening.
Yeah, now that we're not clear on, because their investigation apparently is, and by the way, when they say they're doing an investigation, some of these investigations may be slanted to have the outcome that they want, but they are thorough and they are deep, because they're not stupid. They run the biggest business in professional sports. But you look at Baker Mayfield and you ask, well, why is he still a Brown? Because they knew they weren't going to get fair value for a trade for him the minute they signed Watson. And so now you do the best you can and you get the distraction over with if you're confident of something. But you look at the rest of that roster and you look at what they've now spent against the cap. They can't afford to have a throwaway season here. They may be saying, hey, like it or not, Baker. And Mayfield is then in a tough spot, because if he refuses to, he can not report and not get paid. But then that kind of sullies his, rep with other teams around the league, that he eventually wants to be their franchise quarterback. So it's just a mess, and it's not getting any better. And guys, I always default to, because I've said it once, I'll say it twice, you don't convict people without due process. But what are the odds that 24 different women now have all come up with the same story, and that they're all lying? There's another famous individual that we've talked about with this in the same, not breath, but the same way. It's just highly unlikely, with so much smoke here, that there isn't a little bit of fire. And the Browns are going to have to answer to their fan base forever on that one. And I have no sympathy with that. So they've just created a mess of gigantic proportions that is getting worse, not better. And then you look at the other huge story of the offseason. We don't hear a peep really about Brian Flores' discrimination suit against the NFL. We know that there is some bickering between Roger Goodell and Flores' attorneys about whether it goes to arbitration or in a court. Quite frankly, I don't know how that works. It would appear that the NFL has some leverage somehow to get it in front of an arbitrator. Do either of you guys know any more about that? Not that you should, but I just don't. So I'm just deferring to if anybody does. But short of that, the suit was granted its class action status, and only 2 other coaches joined, and one of them turned out to be lying about his claims. That was Hugh Jackson, who initially said that he was also paid to tank games and had evidence to prove it. And then when it came time to show the evidence, said, well, maybe he stretched the explanation a little bit, and then just flat out kind of went stone cold silent. And so you've got this situation where the NFL has what I believe is a massive problem with underrepresentation of minorities in their top management positions, be it front office or head coaching. It's something that has gone on far too long and does need to be fixed. And yet when you get into court, it becomes legal questions. And, the need for the NFL to fix the problem couldn't be more real, but the efficacy of Flores' claims and what he can prove, that becomes a very difficult and different situation. And we really don't know where that one's at yet either.
Oh, go
Sean?
ahead, Kyle.
No, I would say I don't know. Unlike the Watson one, where I have a pretty strong take or feeling for where this is headed with Deshaun Watson, I don't know what's happening with the Brian Flores thing. Then this is just pure speculation. I'm just guessing here, just given the nature of the allegations, and I don't think Brian Flores is at a stage of his career where he doesn't ever want to coach again. I think he probably does. I think there's probably in some fashion this is going to be worked out behind closed doors, and we're probably never going to. We'll get a commissioner's report or something along that doesn't really tell us much, and the NFL is just going to hope this one kind of fades away. That's how I think it's going to end up.
Well, let me just interject, though. And I know you know this, Kyle. He actually is coaching. I mean, he was hired by the Steelers, and he is now their linebacker coach and assistant. I think he has an assistant.
I guess
coach.
what I meant
a
to
senior
say there
assistant
was
title or something. Yeah.
I don't think he wants to rock the boat to cause himself any more. I think they're progressing probably in a vein that he's okay with. I'm just speculating. But I don't think we're going to see another big blow up of information from this case over the next 6 months or so.
Well, yeah, that last part, I think you're right. I try not to ever get disagreeable here, but I disagree on the rock the boat part. He has no qualms about rocking the boat. I don't think the boat is willing to be rocked right now is the problem. I think
that's probably the better way to look at it. Yeah.
I think I have to believe that he and his attorneys, when they requested the class action status, were hoping a number more minority coaches were going to join the suit. Now they may still be coming. Again, this is stuff. This should not be played out in public, quite frankly. But I think that even I wouldn't say as a condition. I'm sure it wasn't a condition of the Steelers' job, but I'm sure he understands that for him to be out front, being very vocal about this is not in the best interest of his new employer. I think he's obviously a courageous guy, a stand-up guy, and when necessary, he will stand up and be heard. But what I've always wondered about with this is I had done a lot of homework on this before it happened. And there are many, many reasons that Brian Flores is no longer the coach of the Miami Dolphins, which have absolutely nothing to do with race. And I think that's part of the issue here, to be honest with you, is that I admire his courage. I have no question that there is discrimination in hiring in the NFL. And I have no doubt that the man has suffered in certain regards in his life because of the problem we have in this country. But he is also a minority coach who got a head coaching job without ever being a coordinator and was one of the youngest head coaches in the league. And so you question, well, where are the damages? How was he discriminated against? Because that's the essence of these legal battles is you have to have standing to file this suit. You have to prove that you were discriminated against, not just that there may be discrimination. And I think that's where this suit gets a little tricky for them. And he may have all kinds of evidence and claims. We don't know. But when you look at the opportunity he's been given by the league, I don't know that he's the best face of it. I think that the classic guy who I wish would have filed the suit is Eric Bieniemy, because I'd be right there as his main cheerleader saying, what more evidence do we need? But it's kind of hard with Flores. So, Sean, I suspect that at least has to be an issue on both sides as they look at how this thing's going to get adjudicated.
Yeah. And look, this is going to take time. We've been talking about this Deshaun Watson situation for over a year now. And I fully, like Kyle was saying, I fully expect this is going to be a bit of a long, dragged out process before we really come to any sort of resolution. Well,
guys, we're getting near the end here. We've actually gone a little over our kind of arbitrary hour time limit. Kyle, is there anything in the comments we didn't get to that you'd like to get to, or should we maybe start to wrap it up for this week? Or
I think we've pretty much got into everything. Robert Phillips here at the end was, let's see if you guys have any thoughts on this. What are your views of any USFL players coming to the Bears? I couldn't tell you a single USFL team. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah,
I just wanted to see if maybe
I haven't
paid
much attention to it.
One of the quarterbacks signed as a to be a backup for a practice squad job with a team I saw a couple weeks ago. I watched a couple of the early broadcasts because it was decent football. I was intrigued. There were a couple names I recognized. And I would say that now to the Bears, I don't know. I don't know, who Ryan Poles, is scouting, but a lot of those USFL guys were guys who'd had a cup of coffee in the NFL, and I suspect there will be, a handful, maybe a few dozen who end up in training camps. But I'm not aware of any particular player or players or player group that the Bears might have been watching in that league.
Yeah, I don't know how many guys came over from, what was it, the XFL back in, was it like 2019, 2020?
He Hate Me did. I remember He Hate Me. I think I want to say he ended up with the Eagles.
That was the first go around, wasn't it, for the XFL or whatever it was called? Or was it not the
Yes.
XFL? I don't remember. It's all kind of running together at this point. Yeah, there will be some guys that end up in training camp this year from the USFL, but trying to pinpoint any of them would, even if I had seen any of it, would just be guesswork.
Yeah, the original USFL produced a ton of great NFL players. Sam Mills ended up in the Hall of Fame, and so. And not the only one, by the way. And the original USFL also produced a number of great coaches, who ended up with great careers in the NFL. But guys, that was a very different time. That was back in the 80s when NFL scouting departments were not as advanced. The game was just very different, and there was a lot more undiscovered talent. It is a lot harder for an NFL quality player to go unnoticed these days than it was back in the days of the old USFL. So I can predict with some confidence that it won't be that level of participation. Well, if that is everyone's pressing questions, guys, we have not really talked much about a schedule for the next 5-6 weeks. We are not going to go dark for 5 or 6 weeks, but let's do it on the air. I know you guys love when I do this on the air.
That's fine.
Should we plan one for Friday, and then by Friday have a schedule for the rest of the season? Does that sound reasonable?
We're definitely not going to be able to do Friday. I'm off on Friday, so.
Oh, okay.
So I figured we'd be taking this week off since we did it on Monday, but I think maybe the week after we'll come back, whatever that is, that right around the 4th. I think that's the weekend going into the 4th. We'll come back then late in that week and give some people some listening material while they're in the car driving to their 4th of July stuff. Then probably take a couple more weeks off after that.
Yeah, the way to do this, guys, is we can do that much work for you. What we'll do is tentatively plan on Friday, July 1st, which will be a week from this coming Friday at our 9:30 time, Chicago time. And if that changes, just keep an eye on our Twitter accounts. It's at Kyle Nabors. It's at Sean_Hammond. It's at Hub _Arkush. And we'll try not to let that change. And we will come to you on Friday the 1st with a schedule for really at that point, it'll only be 3 remaining weeks because the early rumors are circulating now that the Bears will report to camp on the 27th. We don't know if it'll be that exact day, but it will be that week. And so we'll visit with you in about 10, 12 days and have a schedule for the offseason. In the meantime, we certainly hope that you can find ways to enjoy the Chicago Cubs. We think we should be able to enjoy the White Sox. The injuries can't keep piling up. Kyle's the Sox fan is shaking his head. I do. Kyle, here's as much as I will say about the White Sox. I still don't believe they hired Tony La Russa last year, and I know that last year it worked out okay. But it'll be interesting to see how much longer Jerry Reinsdorf decides to let his best friend have his way with all this young talent. And I'm not writing the Sox off. There's just too much talent on that roster. We're not even at the halfway point right now. At some point, they got to get healthier and have a little better luck. They're obviously not the best team in the American League. But there's still enough young talent there to think maybe they can compete with them the second half. So for Kyle's sake, I'll pull for him. And you're hearing from a guy who in more years than I'm willing to admit can count on one hand the number of times he's pulled for the White Sox. Sorry, guys, but where I grew up in Rogers Park, a doubleheader was when the Cubs won and the Sox lost. And eventually we did grow up and we got past that. I'd rather see the Sox win for my Sox fans, and hopefully that'll happen in the second half of the season. So again, thank you to all of you who joined us live for this broadcast. For those of you listening as a podcast, generally in season, it's every Friday morning at 9:30 Chicago time, as we just told you. Check our Twitter accounts, and we'll have information for you for the next few weeks. If you prefer not to join us live, it's a little disappointing because we love having you here, and we can look at your comments and questions and involve your thoughts and ideas in the broadcast. But the podcast route is great too. If that's the case, go to the App Store on your phone or iTunes or YouTube or any of our Twitter accounts to get a subscription to our podcast so that it is delivered to you automatically. You don't have to go looking for it each week. And until the end of next week, we hope everybody starts to enjoy that summer. We're taping this one on June 20th. Tomorrow is the longest day of the year and kind of the official beginning of summer. So other than the killer heat, stay hydrated, stay cool, enjoy the weather, guys, and we will be back with you in about 10 days. And we hope everything goes well.